Jeremy, you are officially, well, it's you've had this record for a while, but you're out of all the creators I've ever had on the channel, you've been on more than anyone else. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
have.
Thanks again for coming on, man. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Always enjoy it.
So, you just had a new issue come out this week, Fractured
Yeah.
Spectrum.
Yeah.
Read it, really intrigued, really excited to see what, goes
All right.
forward in Green Lantern.
Okay.
I think the last time we chat, it was like issue 9 came out.
Oh, geez.
So it's been a bit.
Yeah. Like
And
10.
how's that going? Like, how do you feel about it?
I, you know, I, it's like Green Lantern's a bit, it's a lot. There's so much mythology going on, and you read Fractured Spectrum, so you can see that we've gone back to kind of a status quo, but there's a lot of uh questionable things going on. Like, what's the real status of the Guardians? Is there something really going on with Kilowog? When did Guy Gardner become Nicolas Cage a national treasure? Like, there's a lot
Right.
of, like, little things that will launch us off into the next arc. But so it's great because I feel like I've sewn up a lot of pieces that from the last run that were
Mm,
kind of dangling that I wanted to use to kind of like do the next story, and then being able to bring in a lot of the other Green Lantern characters so that the Green Lantern Corps will have a strong base to start from. And so I think I've accomplished some of those things. I mean, the honest truth is, I wish I had more time to tell more one-off stories in a way. But I also, as a writer, tend to go like, okay, the story is trying to say this, it's trying to go down this road, and I'm trying to be authentic to what I feel like the story is trying to do. So I don't know how I feel every time I turn in a script. I'm like, well, I'm sure this is the one that gets me. You
oh,
there?
yep.
Sorry.
You froze for a second.
I said, yeah, that was DC. I said this is always the one that I'm always like, every time I turn one in, I'm like, oh man, this is the one that's gonna get me fired. So I hope it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like this issue, like, while like you said, it established the new status quo. I feel like I was like, I got questions. So I was like excited. I was like, I got questions. So I know you can't answer a ton, but
No, no, I get
um,
it. Like, you're like a lot of the questions revolve around so much of the way that the status quo was and all the different emotional lanterns. My feeling is that willpower has and never will be an emotion. And I think that's what's so like, even every time I talk about it, everybody was just like, you'd see people do backflips to try to describe willpower as emotion. It's like, no, to me, willpower is the thing that controls emotion. If I'm getting too greedy, if I'm being too, uh, you know, if I love the wrong thing, if I'm being too fearful, it's always willpower that grounds our emotions. And so the core is that. The core is the centerpiece to where it's the thing that can control all the emotions that are around it in a way. And that's kind of one of the framing points that I've come through. You now see a lot of people like Razor, who's a blue lantern, is now a green lantern. If you can control those emotions, you will settle into the green lantern eventually. But who knows if that'll stay for long? And I could change my mind tomorrow.
I mean, that's a good point. I never really thought of it like that. But did you have this idea, when you were doing the stuff with the United Planets and like you had the emotions changing to these different lanterns? Is that where were you thinking about that then? Like,
Yeah, that was a big part of it because the source energy, they were able to just switch emotional spectrums, and the emotion spectrum was, and that power was growing. That ability to do that was growing because they were nuking all the central power batteries everywhere. So, basically, Theros's idea was, if I take away everybody's atomic bomb and I'm the only one with atomic bomb, I'm going to be super powerful, right? Like, he's
right.
the only one that had a lantern. At least he thought. He didn't know about the secondary lantern the Guardians put on Earth. but that's what he thought. And because of that, that source, because source energy is like kind of the primordial energy of the DC universe, they were able to basically tap into the emotional spectrum in different, like they could switch, you know. But with the
Right.
source lantern being gone, uh, that means that there is no one conduit of emotional energy. And so, what's interesting to me, the idea that it's almost like mutants, right? It's like, and really, Nathan Broom as the Sorrow Lantern, like, is the first one to do that. It's like the emotional spectrum is fractured, and those shards and those pieces are going to manifest into different emotions and different power sets and stuff. But you don't know who's going to get it. It's very randomized, and you don't know if they can control it, and you don't know what will happen to them if they do get it. So there's no controlling mechanism like the central power batteries. Like those central power batteries for those other emotional spectrums, they had their own rituals. They had their own ability to focus that portion of the emotional spectrum in a very orderly way. And now that those aren't
Hmm.
there, it's all bets are off. You know,
It's
the only
gonna
one that has that is the Green Lantern. The Green Lantern has a central power battery. It has a ring that can basically be a conduit for that particular piece of the emotional spectrum. But I feel like the green is the controlling piece of the emotional spectrum.
Interesting. So, are you saying it's gonna be kind of chaotic how, people get the energy of the other emotions? Okay. Oh, that's exciting. Because
I think that,
I
yeah,
I was interested about that because like when I read, that there was going to be people that were going to get this energy and they needed to find them, I was like, oh man, like I love the seed laying of that. I'm like looking
yeah,
forward to seeing it.
yeah. And that's going to be an important piece of the next arc, you know. And then I think also with the sorrow, like there's an element of he's now working not just with himself, right? There's somebody else that has a bigger plan that wants to use him and what he has and what he knows for a bigger purpose. So that's going to be interesting too.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, it's exciting, man. I'm really really enjoying what you're doing with Green Lantern. Really enjoying it.
Thanks.
Um, Tell me about like the Guardians. I noticed they all, represent a different emotion now. Like what
Very
was?
early on, when John Stewart in the last run, remember he had taken on kind of this god power, and he split himself in two at one point. And in the last issue of the run, not the special that came after the last issue of the run, he had created the Source Lantern. And I don't
Yeah.
know if John was fully aware of what he did. He had all this power. And in my head, he was creating this thing, his power source, but I think subconsciously he was also making it a place that could be like a healing thing for the Guardians. You know, the
Mm,
Guardians were messed up at the beginning of that last run, Jeff Thorne's run. They were messed
yeah.
up and they blew up and nobody knew what happened. And I like the idea that this was some sort of like gestation chamber, or like the big reveal is when Kyle goes in. There's like, holy crap, the Guardians are in there and they're being reconstituted. The problem is that no one expected Veron or Star Shroud to be there, and so that that process was short circuited. So between the fight of Kyle as the White Lantern and Veron, that Source Lantern exploded, and
Mm.
those Guardians were released early. So they're not fully formed, and in that they're not fully, at least what we know, they're not fully Guardians, and
Okay.
they have these weird, they're wearing representations of different parts of the emotional spectrum, and what that means yet we don't know, but we'll find out maybe.
Awesome. No, it's cool. I like the last few Green Lantern runs. It seems like, the writers are trying to reinvent the Guardians. And like,
Right.
Grant Morrison, it got really strange for a little while. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I can't really remember a whole lot with Jeff Thorne, but I was excited to see them like, okay, they're each going to represent a different emotion. I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes.
right?
Have you talked to Jeff Johns about any of this stuff?
No, the only thing Jeff told me is that he has really he had he's really enjoyed my run,
Hmm.
and I don't want to talk to him about it
Yeah, right.
because like he's too smart. So, it's like he's just been very. And by the way, he's so busy with Ghost Machine. He's so busy ruling the world with Ghost Machine.
Yeah.
Um, but he said he's enjoyed it, and I don't know. Maybe he's only read one or two, but I
It's like the
imagine.
the blessing from the Pope.
Yeah, yeah,
It's-
yeah. It totally. It's like when Mark Wade, when I met Mark Wade, he's like, "Oh, I really like your Flash run." I was like, "Okay, thank you, Mark Wade." Like I was totally flabbergasted by that.
Speaking of Mark Wade, after I interviewed him, I had to message you. I was like, I can't
Yeah, I
believe it. I
remember.
was like,
He's
yeah,
so cool. He's such a nice guy, and he's such a
yeah,
even like Jeff. Jeff and Mark are similar in this. Like we really like the DC universe. Like we like comics.
yeah.
And I think we like the same thing for Marvel too. We just grew up on that stuff, so we really love that stuff. And so their the width and breadth of their knowledge is so massive.
Oh yeah,
And
that was the best thing about talking with Mark. I was just like, I was very nervous to talk to him because I was like, this is one of my favorite writers ever, and it was just so funny. Him and I were just talking about Flash and Superman
yeah,
and just you know the way I think of like Wally West as a character. I really think like Mark really established the voice. So talking with him was like, oh my God. And I was telling my girlfriend about this. I was like, that's the closest I'll ever get to talking to like my favorite comic book character.
that's so
And
cool.
she was like, that's pretty cool. And I'm like, I sound like such a nerd right now, but like that's how I feel. I
Yeah,
was
no,
like,
that's super cool, dude.
yeah, I walked away from that just being like, that probably sounds super weird, but
Uh,
okay.
that's how I sound. I mean, I'm a complete loser when it comes to people I like. I'm just like, ooh, you know.
But Aquaman, awesome. Uh,
Okay.
I'm so excited, man. When I saw you're gonna write Aquaman, I was like, I've been kind of waiting for another Aquaman book. I have been, you know, although he's not on the top of my list, I'm always like kind of wondering, like, all right, let's see what's going on with him.
Yeah.
But seeing your name attached to it, I was like, oh, I can trust this. I was excited. Like, oh, I want to see what Jeremy's gonna do.
We'll see what you
Um,
think by issue 3. Yeah. Uh boy, that it was a scary thing. Like I want to write more. I feel like I have the capacity to write more stuff. And I had pitched a Brave and the Bold, and it was, and they were like, "That's too good of an idea for Brave and the Bold. You should,
yeah,
you should pitch that as an Aquaman." And so Paul Kaminsky is my editor. I was like, "Hey, I got an idea," and he seemed to be cool with it up front. I think now he's not terrified. He's just like, "Where's this going?" And I'm just like, "Just hold on," you know. Um, it's a really weird thing because I think a lot of us that are fans have a strange relationship with Aquaman where it feels like we can't grip him and who he is and what he is as a character. I think the longest run was Peter David's run, but really that run isn't necessarily in continuity. And that's what's so weird about it. I didn't even know that. I went back and read it, and I was like, "Oh, this is not the Aquaman that was the son of a lighthouse keeper. It was a Tarzan Aquaman. It was an Aquaman raised by dolphins." And I was like, "What?" And like, I'm in love with this dolphin. I'm like, "Whoa, double what? Like this is weird."
yeah,
And it was crazy. And he just kept taking swing after swing after swing because that's what Peter David does, man. He goes for the unexpected. And so, the way that the character has been written a lot in the last whatever, I'm just not smart enough to write. I'm not smart enough to write about internal palace politics and the Atlantean kingdom and stuff. And I was like, but what can I do? What is it that I could take Aquaman or Arthur on? Like, what journey could I take them on that I would find interesting to write? And it's interesting. It's like you can never please everybody all the time. And it's funny how many, there are a lot of people mad at me. They're like, none of the side characters. I'm like, if you've read a Jeremy Adams book, you know that it usually concentrates on one guy, and then quickly gets so overwhelmingly big that he's like, I gotta leave this book. No, um, but Aquaman, there's a lot that I just keep thinking about the kid that was raised on the surface. I keep thinking about that kid. I keep thinking about we don't really talk about that kid. We don't talk about the kid that I've said this in some interviews. Like, does he miss eating a hamburger? Like,
Yeah.
you're not getting any heat. Does he have a favorite television show? Like, there's certain things that I'm like, he grew up above ground, and
Right.
and
You're
and
right.
I
That kind of gets lost.
yeah,
I feel like Aquaman is one of those characters where, sometimes in the past I've read dialogue and I'm kind of like, it's like the superhero and like the king voice. It's like I feel like that's what I was most interested to see how you were going to write Aquaman, because I was like,
right,
how's Jeremy going to do this? Because if you look at your past work, Aquaman's totally not a character that you would write. That's why I
right,
was like, okay, I got to see this, you know?
right. I mean, you're
Um,
you're not wrong. So it's it's very interesting to me because I feel like part of Aquaman's journey is from a place where he is on the surface and he doesn't feel quite like he belongs, and he finds when he finds Mira and he finds that world underwater. I think there is a sense of belonging. So then you take that away, and then you go, now what? You know, we're going to find out a lot more about him and about how he was raised and all that stuff. But I think the main thing is that, sort of like Wonder Woman in a way. It's like, yeah, they're superheroes, but there's also a greater obligation, um, that he can be much more ferocious, and he can be much more powerful than people give him credit for. Especially, like, the worst thing you could do is have a pacifist king, you know, like somebody that wouldn't be willing to go to war for your people, because then people would step all over you. But on the flip side, if you have somebody that yeah, I'll destroy you if you hurt my family. Like, that's a huge incentive. And I think that's kind of like what I feel about Arthur. I feel like Arthur's just like, yeah, I'm one of the super friends. Also, I will rip you in half if
yeah.
you, like I think that's the piece that sometimes gets lost.
Mm,
Um, like, he's happy to save people, and he tries to do his best, but I also think there's a different level of responsibility from being somebody that is a vigilante that swings through the streets, versus somebody that is in charge of the well-being of others in a
mm,
in a very, like, big sense. But I think for this story, it's like, I think there's a reason that we see movies like, say, Commando or Taken or whatever. It's like, you took something that's precious to me, and I will burn the universe down to get it back. Like, and I think through that we'll come out the other side going like, dude, I would not mess with Aquaman. Like, that's the kind of, like, the vibe that, and it's funny because it's like Wonder Woman's like that, right? Like, you go, yeah, uh, she's so lovely, and then at the same time you're like, she will kill everyone if
yeah.
like, if she deems it necessary. Superman won't. Superman will be like, no, I'm going to save the day no matter what. Da, 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 da. I think there are other heroes that are like, sure, but there's a big but there.
Um, yeah, it's just like interesting seeing how the part for me with Aquaman is like the kingdom, like you said, the being the king. I like how you just took that away, and it's like, okay, this is not going to be like your traditional Aquaman thing. It's like
Right.
you get the sense of this is going to be a journey, um,
Yeah.
and you're along
I
for the
don't I
ride.
don't know. And it's the thing. I don't know if people like it, but, like, at the same time, it will be something different for the Aquaman mythos. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
I had somebody, his name will remain nameless, say, I just want it to be about Aquaman saving ships. And I said, Yeah, but we've had 50 years of that. Like,
Right.
if you want that, you can go do that. But like, I feel like part of my job is to try to do something a little different, you know?
Yeah.
And that's hard when you're dealing with something that is so, same thing with Green Lantern, something that has such a huge mythology attached to it and had been written for so long. Trying to find a new quirk or a new alleyway to go down can be daunting, but I'm trying, so I'm having a great time.
So which runs were you kind of looking at? Like you mentioned, like the Peter David. Did you go read like
Yeah,
Jeff's run,
I mean, yeah, of course,
Abnett?
Jeff's runs really important because Jeff really hit the Jeff Jeff's run to me was like directly pointed at people that think Aquaman's a joke, right? Like that was kind of its mission statement, like, you know, from the very get go. And I appreciated that. And I really, really liked that. Plus, I like the way, I mean, it was drawn so beautifully too. And the trench and all that stuff was very, very cool. Um, yeah, Peter David's run was so long and so interesting. And I've dipped in and out of other ones,
Mhm.
but those are the two main ones that come to mind.
I've only really read like Jeff's and like the stuff Dan Abnett did. I've always kind of looked at Peter David and I'm like, I want to read that at some point, but I know it's kind of long.
I am such a huge Peter David fan. Uh, I I first came upon him Incredible Hulk. Like he had that massive run Incredible Hulk, and it was just as Joe Fixit, the Gray Hulk, had turned into the Green Hulk as a kid. I remember seeing that cover on the spinner rack, and I picked it up and I started reading religiously. And what was fun about it was like he would do these actiony things, but he would also be really funny. He was really funny. And then I got addicted to like his Star Trek novels. He's written like I don't know how many Star Trek novels. And then he also wrote like Trancers 3 and 4, which are these kind of obscure movies. And then his X Factor run is just like epic, forever
Yeah.
epic. And I met him once,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, Jim Krieg and I were at the Supernatural thing at San Diego, and Scooby Natural had just come out, and we're talking to somebody, and then suddenly this guy in this little, in my head he had a hat. He probably does. I have to look at it, but he's like, "Hey, are you guys writers?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I'm a writer too." And we're like, "Sure you are," And he goes, "My name's Peter David." And then both of us, just like we were in Scooby Doo, go, "Peter David," and then we're like, we had him sit down and we just started like, okay, so when you were doing this, and we were just like sitting there asking him 1,000 questions. The poor man just getting pillared by us, like asking all these questions about everything he's ever done. It was hysterical. But I was just like, holy crap, I'm talking to Peter David. Because he's one of those guys, like, you know, for me and my age, it's like Peter David, Chuck Dixon, Fabian Nicieza, like a lot of those guys, Mark Grunwald, those were the guys writing everything that I was reading. You know, I just introduced myself to Fabian like a complete loser at New York Comic Con, like, hi, I'm a writer too. It just looks so dumb, but he seemed nice.
Yeah. Um, I saw you did the podcast with Mark Millar recently.
Yeah,
That was a
yeah.
great interview.
Oh,
But
thank
I
you.
was like,
Cool.
yeah, that like I was like, oh, that's gotta be so cool, like talking to him, and
Yeah,
like
totally.
that
It's super cool. It's surreal, but it's super cool.
must have been kind of just like, oh, I know you did like you did another podcast with Dennis Camp,
Yeah,
Adam Kubert, but it
yeah.
was cool to see you guys one on one.
He
Uh,
was he, that was it was so kind of him. And that guy again, he's one of those guys that like Jeff. I always think about Jeff like this. I think about these guys that they're wildly successful, and there's no reason they should be doing a podcast about comic books. There's no
right.
reason they should even be doing comic books. Uh, but they love it so much, and that's the thing that I think, just like me, I love comics. It's not that it pays. It's that it's just in our DNA, I guess, that we love it, and they love it. They absolutely love it, and it's really fun to talk to somebody, especially like him, because post Image, the original Image, split off that Liefeld and all those guys did, which was huge at the time. It was just huge. And then it died down. But then when he started doing his own stuff like Wanted and Nemesis, he was the one that really was the vanguard of like kind of independent superhero stuff that had a very marketable edge to it. And it was just so cool, like to watch this guy. You're like, oh my gosh, the guy who's writing the Ultimates has a movie coming out with Angelina Jolie. Like, you're like, this is
Right.
freaking crazy. Um, and I love that because
Yeah.
that's a rare story.
It's crazy too. Like I look at like the early MCU stuff and I just see so much Mark Millar
Yeah,
inspiration from there, like the Ultimates, all
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I'm just like, man, that's got to be such a weird feeling. Big movie. Like it's like going to see a movie and be like, oh, they're doing Ultimates. I did that. You know what I mean? Like that's got to be so strange.
It's got to be the weirdest thing. I hope
Yeah.
someday to have that feeling. You know?
Um, Going back to, Green Lantern, I wanted to like just, talk to you about Kyle Rayner with the White Lantern stuff. You got me really excited with that, man. Is that going away? Like
Yeah, for a
it's
bit.
going away? Yeah, okay. Because I was kind of like when you were teasing it, because there was those moments where he was just kind of like in the corner, like everyone would be talking, Kyle's in the corner. I'm like, something's going on,
Yeah,
White Lantern. And
yeah,
then, the last arc wrapped up with Kyle with as green White Lantern.
yeah. So that I mean that had to do with that whole Source Lantern, the emotional spectrum being so jacked up, and obviously he's the one that's probably more in touch with all the different emotions than anybody else. You know,
Right.
and I think what he did at the end was really just kind of like embrace all of that. Whereas somebody like Sinestro, became the fractured lanterns. He became a Red Lantern because of his rage. Kyle took all those things and became the White Lantern to go in and fight Baron, and inevitably get defeated. By the way, which
Right.
oh crap! But then he's the one who threw him into space and sealed up that piece of space. Kyle's going to be in it because again, I think the base level I'm having people really focus on the willpower to withstand all that emotion. So he's back as a Green Lantern, and he is going to be part of the next quest. But in the next year, Kyle will have a lot to do. So
Okay.
about that,
I'm excited that you got Green Lantern Corps coming too. Like
yeah,
it's
with Morgan Andrews.
cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was thinking like I was gonna ask you like are you writing that series or I mean is he's helping you write it or is
Yeah,
he
yeah,
going to be
yeah. We're
writing
both
it?
just writing it together and
Okay.
just fitting ideas together and breaking things together and so that'll be really fun. And they will both, they both of them are the ones that spin out of this fractured spectrum. Both of them are dealing with that.
Okay.
The cool thing about the Green Lantern Corps is that we get to spend more time with individual lanterns, which will be cool. So we'll have a few arcs, like a few issues that we'll deal with John in like the A plot, and then like another character in the B plot, and then we'll go to another character and another character, and we'll try to do that a bit while we flesh out this overarching story that's going to combine both Green Lantern and the Green Lantern Corps.
Awesome. Now is that gonna feel like so say, you're doing an arc in Green Lantern and that's like are you going to have like a part one there and then part two is in Green Lantern Corps? Are they gonna feel like their own stories kind of branching off
At
from each other?
first, they'll probably feel like their own stories, but they'll be
Okay.
connected. Like you'll that like literally the fractured spectrum and what's going on with the sorrow is going to be the kind of mission statement for both books, but that'll allow for different stories for each book. The carryover of like part one, now you need to go read this book. I think we're building to that so that at a
Okay.
certain point it'll be like, if I can do a internal Green Lantern event, that's what I want to have happen. It's like part one Green Lantern, part two Green Lantern Corps, part three Green Lantern. You remember how it used to be, or
Yeah.
like the way that Superman used to be, where it was the triangle that would go like Superman, Adventure Superman, that sort of thing. That
Right.
won't be forever though. That'll just be for the event that will take place.
Okay. Awesome. Um, I wanted to talk to you also about Carol Star Sapphire. Like I
Yeah,
feel like you kind of got like Mark kind of took her away from you because now she's in Justice League.
no, that was we talked about that. It
Oh
was
yeah.
I might have even brought it up because it was like we were talking about something, and he was talking about his roster for Justice League, even though it's everybody.
Mm,
But I was very much. I was keen to give. I want Carol to be more than just Hal's girlfriend.
yeah.
I think that Star Sapphire is a cool power set. I think it's a cool character. I think that that character can live on its own outside of Hal. And the best way to do that is just get a little distance. But she's going to be in and out of Green Lantern. I just think
Okay.
that in a way, having her, face off against the Predator in a fashion, and then her having to come to terms with like, yeah, she might know certain things, but she doesn't necessarily know how to be a superhero. Like she does, but she doesn't. It's not her. It's not her operating procedures. So
Yeah.
her being part of the Justice League is going to add a whole new dimension to who she is as a character, which is super cool. And
Yeah.
Mark really took that and ran with it. So it's been really fun to be because you always need like I always feel like you need a lantern on the Justice League. So he's just you know it's been great to see her on that. And then but Hal will, he's got to visit his girlfriend every once in a while, and they got to get in shenanigans. And that'll happen in both books.
I like how she was kind of used as like a healer in that first issue of
Yeah,
Unlimited. I was like,
that was
that's so cool.
surprising to me too. I thought that was
Yeah.
cool though.
Yeah. Um, because she's been a Star Sapphire obviously before,
Yeah,
but now it just feels so different. And I've seen like some people kind of talk about like, oh, but she was a Star Sapphire before. Why is it so new now? And I'm like, if you go, I mean, for me as a fan, I'm reading this as like this is a totally different kind of Star Sapphire. This is different than
yeah,
before. Before she was more kind of like possessed by it. You mentioned like the
right,
Predator.
right.
Um, so
That's why the Predator. That's part of why the Predator was there. Is you and I think some of it is real and some of it is unreal, right? Like so how much was it her just doing things on her own and how much was it her being influenced by this other thing that was giving the ability to do things.
right.
So now that she's a little bit unsure, and that's going to be interesting. That's interesting. And even her conflict with the Predator, i think has I think that has deeper meaning because those avatars of the emotional spectrum, I can't say anything more.
Oh, I mean, I'm excited to see what that means, but um yeah, so was that kind of your way of telling, us like the audience that this is different now, including the Predator with that?
Yeah, yeah, because she's on her own. I mean, she
Yeah.
really is the last of the Violet Lances, the Zamarons, type thing. She's the last one, and it doesn't have it's such a Star Sapphire is such a weird character in terms of like when she was created and the way that she was kind of possessed when she became the Star Sapphire and would be an antagonist to Hal Jordan.
Mm,
And that's changed in and out of time. They brought in the Predator, and sometimes it's the Predator's influence or not the influence. And so this is her kind of saying, like, now I'm on my own. Now I'm my own person with this power. And not only is she the own person, she's the only one with it. She's the one. She's kind of the torchbearer for that thing.
right.
Um, and so that makes her unique and special.
Isn't it so weird with like all this, the Green Lantern stuff, like with Star Sapphire and like, Sinestro's ring, and Black Hand, like it's so weird that like Jeff thought like, oh my God, like all these different cores. It's like I remember reading that as a kid and thinking to myself, I'm like, you're telling me this is new? Like no one thought it to do this before? Like
It's
it
so funny.
felt so
I,
odd.
it's weird because I was like looking at an old book that I had when I was in junior high, and I remember I drew a picture of a guy named the Red Lantern, and that was it was there. Jeff was smart. He put it together before anybody else got to it. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's Mark Wade telling me about one when I told him about 1 Minute War. He's like, should have come up with that. Like it was such a smart. I think the genius for me for Jeff. I mean, he's a genius anyways, but the parallax thing is the smartest retcon I've ever seen ever.
Oh, I know.
Like, taking something that is so bizarre in comics where you're like, yeah, but your weakness is yellow. You know what I mean? Like we're all going
Yeah.
like, what? Like no one blinked an eye back then.
Yeah.
And that little Jeff was like, this is the stupidest thing. Like, like I got to figure out how to make this make sense. And then he does it in a way that opens up this amazing, just all the lantern. And then it's like, it's unstoppable, right? Like the minute you realize, oh yeah, it's a thing, and there are other lanterns, it's like, oh, that's like a decade worth of material. You
Oh
know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like, wow, you just struck a mine of gold. So
Yeah.
great, so great.
I'm rereading all that stuff now, and like I said, that was like one of the first runs that I ever really read in like single issue, and I just couldn't wrap my head around that this was like new. So I
Yeah,
always have just like a sense of, as a fan, ownership over that stuff. And I feel like every couple of years I'm like, I got to reread it because it's in like my top five.
yeah,
But
it's
like I'm
it.
at Blackest Night right now, and I'm like, oh my God, like this is it, you know?
Should be in your top one, is what
Oh, it's
for
well,
Green
it's
Lantern.
definitely. I mean, for Green Lantern, of
Oh
course.
yeah,
I mean, I just talked to Ron Mars. He was the previous interview, and I was like kind of I couldn't wait to just like talk to him and ask him like, what do you think of all the Jeff stuff and like, the Parallax retcon. And I didn't really know that, the Parallax twist and all that, like that wasn't even his idea. Like editorial was like, we want Hal Jordan's gonna be evil and this is what you gotta do, this, that. And then you get to you can make a Green Lantern after the aftermath. I was like, that's got to be the coolest thing ever. Like they're like
crazy,
telling you what you got to do, and then you're like, I got to make a Green Lantern who's stayed the test of time now. It's like
crazy.
insane, yeah. Oh, but yeah, I it's cool reading the Jeff stuff and then
Yeah,
reading your stuff right now because it's like you're going back to a lot of that, which I feel like it seems like a lot of writers don't want to even touch the emotional spectrum. Like they're
yeah,
like, nope, I want nothing to do with it. Like Grant Morrison did
yeah.
nothing with it,
I
hardly
know.
anything. But I like how you're embracing it, but like putting your own twist on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been.
Oh,
I mean, it's been how long? I mean, that's the thing. It's like if it was like the last run, even the run before. I mean, when was the last time they actually did something with it? It's been a long time.
probably
Um,
Robert Venditti, beginning of
Maybe,
Rebirth.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So enough time had passed that it's like it's kind of fertile ground. But it was fertile ground for me to tell a story that kind of took a lot of the pieces from Jeff Thorne's run and ran with it. Like it just I think it organically moved that way. Because if you read my run, it's really not about that until Sinestro shows up.
Right.
And then it's like, even then, you're like, why is Sinestro red? You
Yeah.
know, and you still don't know until a couple issues after when the United Planets lanterns show up. And at that time, Philip Kennedy Johnson and I were talking a lot, and I know that he had them show up in his too. And so then it's like, wait, who are these lanterns that are changing their spectrum? Like that was weird, that hadn't been done. And that's when we really are like, okay, now we're moving along into something that is much more, adheres much more to what's happening with the emotional spectrum. But obviously, the emotional spectrum, once we get to space and we start realizing that central power batteries are being exploded and there are no more, lanterns out there, then it's like, what the f is going on? I probably did that too long. I probably played it before we got that information too long. Um, I don't know. I could have gone another year, honestly. But I also realized that I was driving everybody nuts by having 2814 quarantined. And
Oh,
I would get somebody going like, dude, so I can't go out of space. I'm like, well, you can't go out of 2814, like
yeah.
it was becoming a nuisance.
I liked that though because I felt like, I have like some friends that like, they like Green Lantern, but they get lost with the space stuff. I love all the space sci-fi. So it was so cool to be like, oh, he's grounded.
Right.
And Hal Jordan as a character, I feel like his Earth life is like almost non-existent at this
Yeah.
point. Like
Yeah.
he like it's just like I was like kind of wondering like what is he gonna do? And I like how you just put him in a little trailer and he was just, hanging out. That was great. I like
I
that.
love that too. I love the idea that like, $13 in a checking account. And the poor trailer, it's his brother's trailer and it's totally destroyed. Like I feel bad.
Um, I'm waiting for when they finally bring out the Red Lantern Sinestro figure. I keep thinking about that. I'm like, I want to see that.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get it.
Red Lantern Mogo, man.
Oh, pfft. You know what's funny is like I don't know. I'm younger than you, so I remember like growing up, like I loved the Transformers, like Unicron.
Yeah,
I was just saying how like that was probably my favorite gift ever for Christmas.
dude.
And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, what if they did that for Mogo? But then I was
Oh
like, it wouldn't transform, so it's just a ball. It's just like, oh, maybe it
ah,
wouldn't be that cool. I would like it, but
yeah, totally, totally.
yeah. But I also wanted to bring up you did World's Finest, Green
Yeah,
Lantern, Green Arrow.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
and I like how it kind of just fit right into that run, like with
Yeah, like
Neil
that was
Adams
fun. They
and New
kind of
Teen
said,
Titans.
yeah, they were just like, hey, you want to, you know, there were a lot of like kind of boundaries on it, but like finding a way to make it be kind of like the preamble to Deathstroke's appearance in Teen Titans was really fun. And even you know, it's funny. You read the Hard Traveling Heroes; it's just so deeply political and interesting, and it's definitely an object of its time. And I think all I love the idea that Hal Jordan drives slow on a car trip. He goes fast everywhere, but I love the idea of him like, no, I'm with my friend. I'm gonna go see the biggest ball of yarn, like that kind of thing. But it drives Ollie absolutely crazy, and that's probably the reason he does it. And then and then their conversation about cops, is just to me very indicative of Oliver Queen authoritarian, but it was fun. It was fun because it was a very simple, straightforward thing. If I had more time to, I don't know, tell a bigger story, I guess I would tell something bigger. But that was just a fun,
Yeah,
like,
no, I remember I was like, oh, this is gonna be cool, nice little one-off issue.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'm all for doing those. I love one-off issues. I think there should be more one-off issues. So people get upset about them, and I'm just like, when I was growing up, that was a huge part of comics. It was like you
oh
just do a
yeah,
one-off, and it's like it's a way to give you a taste of the characters and see if that's something you want to read, or oh, I like this Green Arrow guy, or whatever.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I wish there was more comics like that where it was just a one-off story because we all got into comics through that random issue that was part three of some storyline, and like I feel like no one gets into comics that way anymore. And it's like everyone wants like, oh well, where's a good jumping on point?
yeah, that's what was
Um,
great about the Flash. Like for some reason, when I was writing the Flash, it lent itself to go like I could do a 3-issue arc, and then I could do a couple single issues, and then I could do a 3-issue arc and a couple single issues. And I was hoping I could do that with Green Lantern, but it was so heavy serialized. Like there was so much about Green Lantern to me that is trying to that makes it a bigger story.
mm,
And I was like, gosh, this is intense. Like this, it was forcing itself into a story that was much bigger than it was. For Flash, for me, that was it was easy to sit there and go, let's just have a fun episode. Let's have a fun issue, you know?
Oh yeah.
And that was really simple. And Green Lantern not so much. And with Aquaman, I think with characters for me anyways, characters that haven't been around for a bit, I think it's a little more difficult because you have to reestablish them as characters that the readership can be like, oh yeah, this is I now I understand his version of Arthur or his version of Hal. Um, but if you do that for a while, then it becomes like, oh, now I can tell one-off stories. You know, once I get some of the serialized stuff out of the way.
I think Chip Zdarsky did a issue of Batman that I distinctly remember when it came out. I want to say it was like maybe 150 or something.
You know,
I don't even, I could be totally wrong. They might not even be on 150 yet. I can't remember, but it was a recent issue, and I just remember like reading it and then telling a friend, I was like, just read this one issue. It's a great little one-off story,
right?
like digestible. You don't have to, and
Oh,
it's not
was it the
gonna.
one? Was it the one where it was like that guy knew his alter ego? Did you ever read that one? It's
I
one
think
issue,
so.
and it's like the bad guy knows he's going to sell Batman's alter ego for the
Yeah,
highest bidder, and everywhere he goes, Batman's there, just like
yeah,
you know,
yeah. That's
it's
the issue.
such a good one-off. It's such a good one-off.
Yeah, it's speaking
That dude,
of,
that guy's like such a good writer, though.
Chip Zdarsky,
Yeah,
it's just weird to think that he started as an artist and then now he's just writing. And
you've seen his fanzines, his thing that he's been doing for.
yeah,
They're hilarious.
have you seen his trailer reactions to
Oh my
like
gosh,
he just did the one for Daredevil, which was just
oh,
like someone, ringing the doorbell, and then he's just like, "Oh, it's all this money."
it's so good,
Yeah,
so good.
he's hilarious, but it's gonna be sad when he's not on Batman. But then we get Jim Lee, Jeff Loeb, so it's like
Right, right,
cool, which
right.
that's exciting
But
to see.
you can't cry too long, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, the thing is like I love like Jorge Jimenez and like Dan Mora. Like whenever I see them, I'm like, oh my God, those are like the best two artists right now. Like I always have like this little joke where I'm like, oh, Dan Mora, we need more of him because he's just so good, you know? But like he's like the first artist in a long time where like the moment he's not drawing a book, I'm like, oh no, do I really like this book or was it just Dan Mora?
Ah,
You know?
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
really good. I mean, I will say selfishly, like I think John Timms is unbelievable on Aquaman, and I think it's just going to get better. I Zermanico to me, if I could just hook a chain to him for all of time, I would be very, very glad
Oh
because
yeah.
every time he does anything, I'm just like, gosh dang it, this is so good. Like
Yeah.
he's so good.
I remember what you said last time we talked that you're like amazed that he hasn't been stolen from you and like put on Batman or something.
100%,
Yeah.
110%.
Yeah.
I've been convinced that it's over, you know. And he's just that good, and I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna weep like a baby when they take him away.
But John Timms though, like I mean, I've followed his work for a while and honestly I feel like that first page with Aquaman jumping out of the water, I'm like, that's the best I've ever seen from him. Like
Dude,
just
he's
looks
so good. I'll tell you the one that I think is coming up. I think V Ken on the Fractured Spectrum. I dig his art. Like
yeah.
I'm just like, man, there's a vibe here, and there is, uh, you know, even with his like he has a Kickstarter that just looks just wild, and it's like the dude is really good, and he's just getting better. And
Well,
when you
you know
have
what's
somebody
weird?
that's getting better,
Oh,
it's like,
yeah. It's what's weird is I was looking at some of the faces when I was, reading Fractured Spectrum, and I was like, this is giving me some like Michael Turner kind of vibes.
yeah,
Like the
totally.
faces and the hair, like just like I was like, wow, like
He's
I'm
got
really
some
curious to see where he goes with that.
manga stuff. Like he can just do emotion in a way that I'm just like, dude, that's rad. I
It's
dig it.
weird how like that's the style now, is like the manga influence.
Yeah,
Like I feel like maybe in like the 2010s, it felt like everyone was kind of copying like Stuart Immonen. Like every
yeah,
comic felt like it was Stuart Immonen was drawing it.
yeah.
Now it's
Yeah,
all, and I don't know if it was like Jorge or, just the trends with manga, but like it just, everything's manga inspired now, which is cool.
yeah. No, I like to see the kind of like ebbs and flows of art. It's cool, but
Yeah.
the talent is, you know, it's like every time Fernando Pasterin sends me something, and I'm just like, you're so ridiculous, and he'll kind of like beat himself up. I'm like, just shut up. Like I'm looking at your background. They're so detailed. They're so epic, and I don't even know how you conceptually even start something like that. you know.
My
Uh,
my brother's an artist, and I always say the same thing to him. We're working on a book right now, and I'm
cool.
like I like will map out a scene of like a car doing all this, and like I'm like, how did you even do that? Like, how do you
Yeah,
just like it's just like weird, and then like certain poses, faces. I'm like, that's insane,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
totally know what you mean.
I've tried to like sit down and go, I'm going to learn to draw, and it's like 2 seconds. I'm like, I am not going to learn to draw. Like,
I still can't believe that they let Tom King actually do like actual covers, the sketch. I'm like, come on. Like it's funny as hell, but it's like, damn.
it's so funny. But that's the type of stuff I wish comics would do more, like weird, just stupid, just off the, there's like a fart Harley Quinn thing coming out with like scratch and stick fart stickers on it.
Oh yeah, I was
I'm like, what? I'm like, you
yeah.
people won't take my pitches?
What's
But
funny
I
is
mean,
like
it's just weird. Like, do something weird. Do something weird.
I just think of like the disappointed person that buys the digital of that. And they're like,
Oh,
I'm
totally.
missing.
I never
Yeah.
thought about that. They're like the biggest Harley Quinn fan. They're like, wait a second.
Yeah, they're missing out on a little bit of it.
That's so funny, dude. That's hilarious. Shoot.
Um, Real quick, I know you have to leave soon, but I was just wondering what other books are you reading, like,
Reading?
enjoying? Yeah.
Um, Man, I mean, we talked about Chip Zdarsky. I've been enjoying that. I love all the absolute stuff is super cool. Um, I've been digging. You know what's weird is a lot of my time has been eaten up by other people sending me books that they want me to review.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I'm getting a lot of like really cool. There's this guy at Monster Forge has a book out that I think is just swell. I really think it was good. My friend Ernie Altbacker just came out with it, or I don't think it's out yet, but funniest book. I was like, I'm not gonna like this. I like you too much to like this. And I'm like, oh, this is really good. But even the modern stuff I've been reading like the GI Joe stuff. I've been reading, man, it's weird, a lot of stuff, and for whatever it escapes me right now. It's also weird when you're a writer that I'm reading and writing all day. So it's also
Yeah.
weird to sit down and go, I'm gonna relax. But I've got DC Infinite and Marvel Unlimited, and I've been trying to just break into that. I'll go back and read a lot of old stuff. I'm not gonna lie. I
Yeah.
was reading some Marv Wolfman Green Lantern Corps, and I was going back and just reading some like old Batman stuff and some old Blue Beetle stuff because I'll reread the Blue Beetle stuff all the time. And so I go back into the back issues quite a bit. And then with the new stuff, I wait till there's a good head of steam, and then I read through it all. Like
Yeah.
Chip Chip Zdarsky's. I did that with Tom King's Batman. I swear I had 100 issues, and I was like, all right, now I can start.
Oh, yeah. I did the same thing.
I
I did.
freaking hate like going like, oh, oh, what happens next? You know what I mean? So like,
Oh, yeah.
that happens to me all the time.
Yeah, there's
I'm
certain things that you
surprised.
just want to read and you just
I know,
can't
yeah,
like
yeah,
like you don't want to like catch up and then be like, oh, now I'm reading it monthly, and it's like,
yeah,
oh, I want to
yeah,
just binge read the whole thing. I did
yeah,
that
yeah,
with Tom King's Batman,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it was killing me because I'd been reading Batman monthly for so long that I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like I'm like missing out on it. Like it's like, oh
I think mostly, I think a lot of Tom King stuff is meant to be read all together at once. Like, I read
yeah,
Supergirl at once. I read, Human Target at once. It would, to me, it would be super infuriating to read those monthly.
yeah. I feel like I know what you mean. Like I I started Tom King's Batman when it was first coming out, and I just remember
Yeah,
the pacing of it, and it was
yeah,
like, oh my God, this is just not like the typical Batman.
No.
And I remember it led to me dropping it. And then when I was like,
Really?
oh, I need to give that another chance. And when I just read it all in one go, I was like, oh, this is great. I just couldn't appreciate it on a monthly basis because I'd be
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
what's going on? Like,
Yeah. There's like a tone and a vibe to it that like when you get into it, you're like, ooh. And that happens with like really good dramas, that I'll watch on television. I'll be like, I don't know, I gotta wait a week. And then it's
yeah.
like, but versus there are some that you're like, ooh, yeah, I can't wait till next week.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's, I'm reading a lot of stuff. So,
Well, hey man, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me again. It's
no
nice catching
problem.
up with you, asking you
Yeah,
questions.
thanks for
I'm
having me,
really
bro.
really hoping that, one of these days I get to meet you at a con, hopefully.
Have we not met in person? It feels like we met in
No.
person and we
No,
haven't.
yeah. I'm hoping Terrificon, man. Like you
Oh,
got to come to
dude,
Terrificon.
I'm I'm trying to convince people to have the people invite me, because
Yeah.
I heard Terrific Con is terrific. I heard it's a really great con,
Oh.
and I've never been up there. I've never been to Connecticut or anything, so like I would love to go.
Oh
I
yeah.
would bend over backwards to go.
Oh yeah, I reached out to the guy that runs it, and it's funny every year, like before the con starts, I'll send my little email list because like I think in the bottom of it it says like oh like reach out like for guest requests, and I think he got overloaded with guests because he took that off on the website.
That's funny. That's
But
great.
I was saying like Jeff, I was saying like Mark Wade, Josh Williamson, you, and I'm like get these guys here, you know.
I told Mitch Garrett, I said, "You better get me over there, Mitch." I was like,
I met Mitch and Tom King there. I was like, it was like later in the day, it's starting to wind down. There was no line. I was like, I gotta go say hi to Tom King.
"Yeah,
And I got a book from him, signed it. So,
I
but
don't, I don't, I'm like acquainted with Tom, but Mitch, I love Mitch. We've been to a bunch of conventions now, and so we always end up going to get dinner. We were just in New Orleans, and he's such a nice guy, such a singular talent too, like just unbelievable talented guy. Just
yeah,
I heard him once say like, "This is my legacy," and I was like, dude, I wish like he thinks he puts that into his work, which is so cool.
no, yeah, and it's awesome. And I remember there was that issue, or was that cover that he did, I think of his son, and it was
Yeah,
like a flash. And I know exactly what we're talking about. I was like,
yeah,
that's so cool,
so
like
cool.
that's gonna
Yeah,
live on.
he's unbelievable.
But
All right,
I know.
brother. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, man. And we'll talk soon. I'll let you know when the video's up, but really appreciate it like always. And hopefully we get you to Terrificon.
So good. All right, man. Take it easy.